Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Apologies for the delay in getting started, but we're so grateful for you all being here today. Thank you so much for joining us for this Climate Week event toward a Glasgow Declaration accountability framework, delivering truly international forest protection from the tropics to the global north. I'm Jennifer Skeen. I'm the Natural Climate Solutions Policy Manager with the International Program. And before we get started, I just wanted to flag that this event is being recorded and the recording will be made available afterwards. And then in terms of the format, after Manish provides some opening remarks, we'll hear from each of the panelists. And then following that, Manish will facilitate a moderated discussion. And then that'll be followed by an opportunity for an audience Q&A. So you can submit questions through the Q&A box available in your Zoom window, and feel free to start inputting those during the moderated portion of the panel. And then with that, I'm very delighted to introduce NRDC's President and CEO, Manish Bhapna. Manish.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Jennifer, thank you for that warm introduction. Really incredibly important conversation we're going to be having here today in the middle of Climate Week in New York. I want to start by actually acknowledging that Climate Week is taking place on the traditional lands the Lenape peoples. Want to just acknowledge the genocide, the continued displacement of indigenous peoples that is taking place in so many parts around the world. This particular land here in New York has been a gathering place for indigenous peoples to trade, maintain kinship ties. These communities continue to contribute to the life of this city, celebrate their heritage, practice traditions, care for the land, and waterways that are so sacred to them and to all of us. So just want to start with that. Also want to start with, here we are at Climate Week once again, and just a recognition both of what we're seeing happen around the world, the need, and we say always about urgency, we always talk about ambition. But I want to also make sure we talk increasingly about action and about equity. And I think those are two just pieces we need to lift up more in these conversations, and that I think we're going to be elevating in today's conversation. Today's conversation, is really focused on forests and the governance of international forests, and looking at forests writ large, from the tropics to the boreal and everything in between, because we all know how precious forests are to life. We talk about climate, we talk about biodiversity, we talk about equity as critical crises facing the planet. We can't solve any of them unless we protect our forests. Right? We all know that, critically important. 2 years ago at COP26, more than 140 countries came together to sign the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on forests and land use. It was a big step forward, right? But it was a commitment. It was ambitious. But how do we think about turning that into action? How do we think about turning and making sure that is equitable? And one of the challenges with the declaration is that a declaration is only meaningful if it's implemented, and if it's implemented fairly. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we make sure that the implementation covers all forests? And what we're going to talk today about is an increasing recognition that it needs to look at what's happening in the global north, what's happening in the boreal and temperate forests, what's happening with industrial logging, and the critical role that plays in the north, and what has escaped attention for much too long. The consequences of getting this right are absolutely critical. We know that the forests are critical to biodiversity, they're critical to climate, they're critical to a more inclusive, sustainable future. And so digging in more into how we think about ensuring that this declaration covers the challenges, the opportunities of tackling industrial logging in the global north is critical, and how we put in place accountability frameworks in order to help make sure that people that make commitments on a stage actually act on those commitments, and they translate into the types of changes we need to see on the ground. And in that context, we got a great distinguished panel from many different perspectives from many different parts around the world. I'm going to take a moment to introduce each of them one by one. And after I introduce them, I'm going to ask them to say a few words. The structure we have today, we're going to have kind of opening remarks from each of the speakers. And then we're going to have a little bit of a panel discussion that I'm going to moderate. And then we're going to take some questions from the audience before we close. So we're going to try to make this super interactive. With that, I'm delighted to introduce someone who most of you will know, Professor Dr. Bill Muma, Professor Emeritus of International Environmental Policy at the Fletcher School at Tufts, a world-renowned forest science and policy expert, distinguished career, but a real indelible mark on international forest governance, and one of the lead authors of 5 different IPCC reports. Bill, great to have you with us today. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Manish. It's really a pleasure. I a little overwhelmed by the introduction, but I'll do my best here. It's you know, I'm a physical scientist by training, and one of the problems we've had is that much of the climate discussion, IPCC, has been by physical scientists who don't really know much about forests and things. But I began to realize that about 20 years ago, and teamed up with a group of forest carbon scientists and wetland scientists, and that's what I've been working on ever since. Because you know, we've known forever that the increase in carbon dioxide every year is less than half of what we put in. And which magical technology is doing that? Well, it's forests and oceans, both primarily, right? And there's no technology that's going to come close to that in the next 100 years, and yet we're degrading them. And so I think it's really important that we focus on forests right now and get the message out. Thank you for hosting this event.
Thank you very much, Bill. And next, I'd like to introduce Deputy Grand Chief Norman Wapachi. Deputy Grand Chief Wapachi was elected Deputy Grand Chief Vice Chair in 2021, and since then has been a staunch leader for the protection of the Cree territory of EU Ische, located in the heart of Quebec's boreal forest. His motto, I love this, is "Let us give our land a voice." Let us give our land a voice. And he spent his career doing just that, ensuring protection of the land and an environmental justice for the Cree peoples. Deputy Grand Chief, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to take part in this event, and it's a pleasure meeting you all. My name is Norman A. Wapachi. I'm the Deputy Grand Chief of the Cree Nation. And I think I'm the only Cree leader that doesn't live in the community, that lives out on the land. And I've been living there with my father. I was raised out on the land, hunting, fishing, trapping. And I was involved in public administration for over 20 years for Ojibwe. I'm from the community of Ojibwe, which is in the southern part of the Cree Nation. We occupy lands east of James Bay and Hudson Bay, right up to Labrador, close to Labrador, and we border with the Innu. And yeah, it's a huge area that we about 80-90% of our people depend on the forest for hunting, fishing, and trapping. And they wanted, when I ran for Deputy Grand Chief, and for me, I believe that the land, it has life, it has breath, but it has no voice to defend itself. And that's why I came up with that motto, let us give our land a voice. Because reality on my side, we are not Cree, but there was a term that was imposed on us. I always remind my listeners when I speak that we are Innu. And what Innu means is a living being, a living spirit. We define our land as Inuisti, which means a living land. And Innu and Iusti are interconnected and interdependent with all forms of life within Iusti. What you do to the land, you do to the people. And forestry has been a big impact for decades within our territory. Like I said, I'm from Ojibwe, the one of the smallest communities that occupy the southern part of EUSG. Back in the 1920s, within a 50-year period, we were forced to relocate our villages 7 times within a 50-year period to make room for development. And it was always in the name of progress. And we had to fight for our rights, to stand up for our rights, to be able to take part and regain our, because development almost took precedence over our traditional way of life. And then we embarked on a journey to ensure that we were no longer marginalized from the economic, political life of our region, that we took part. We had our rightful place within the territory. And then we negotiated at that level to be included into the James Bay Nordic Quebec Agreement, and to be included as the 9th Cree band within the Cree Nation. So I'm from a small village, and it's a beautiful village. And we've won international awards, especially from the United Nations, as one of the themes during 2000, where mankind living in harmony with nature. So one of the 50 communities that were selected to take part at the United Nations in 2000 in Hanover, Germany. So I had the privilege to be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just to elevate that point you made, sitting here in New York in the middle of Climate Week, that point around spirituality and the connection we have with each other and with the land is something often we sometimes forget in the middle of these conversations. And so thank you for bringing that back into this conversation. Our next panelist is Manuel Carmona Yebra. He's the Counselor for Environment and Oceans with the delegation of the European Union to the United States. In this role, he manages EU-US policies related to nature protection, plastics, pollution, oceans, and fisheries, and previously was at the European Commission, where he worked on issues at the intersection of nature and climate change and adaptation and oceans protection. So delighted, Manuel, to have you with us.
Thank you, Manish. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to focus my intervention on the EU action, basically on the EU deforestation regulation as part of the international governance that we want to see in this field. So what it is, why it is there now, and how it's going to work. On the what it is, I guess some of you are already familiar. Basically, it's a very bold step to fight global deforestation and forest degradation. And accountability, as you were mentioning, Manish, accountability is certainly at its heart, because we need accountable supply chains to make progress here. First, our regulation does not distinguish between tropical or boreal forests. That's an important point. All forests are covered in accordance with an objective FAO definition. Second important point, it focuses on supply chains of 7 commodities. Those commodities have been chosen because they are particularly important in the EU, so we can make most of the impact by regulating those. These are cattle, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, rubber, soy, and wood. Another important point, it obliges operators to do something that actually they should have been doing already, which is understanding their supply chains so that they can base claims that they are sustainable. Operators are operating in the EU who place these commodities on the EU market or export them from the EU elsewhere. We need to exercise, as of now, due diligence to ensure two things. First thing, that the products are deforestation free, and this means that they have not been produced on land that was degraded or deforested after 31st December 2020. And second, that their products are legal. Legal meaning they're produced in line with the relevant national laws in the producing country, beyond environmental laws. We're talking here as well about labor, human rights, indigenous peoples, respect of national laws in all those fields. A fourth important element, possibly the most important, the regulation applies equally to producers inside the Union, so to European producers, and outside the Union. So it is not protectionist. It's fully compatible with the WTO. So it's unassailable on that count. And we are pretty sure about that. So that's the what. Very quickly, why? Why now? Well, forest, it was mentioned before, it's at the heart of all three pillars of sustainable development, social, economic, environmental. It's key to measure. It's a thermometer to measure how we're doing with SDGs, really, as it intersects most of them. It will help us achieve key global commitments, again, crisscrossing the Paris Agreement, global biodiversity framework. All our commitments, all our aspirations go through forests. However, we're losing them. Between 2000 and 2020, we've lost forest globally twice the size of Spain, twice the size of my country. And most of it because of driven by deforestation, by agriculture expansion. An agricultural expansion that is even failing to feed the world. So that's the dilemma as well, because as we know, people around the world are hungrier than they were in 2005. So how are we at the same time deforesting with, let's say, the excuse that we need to feed the world and actually not feeding the world? Clearly, this points at the way we do agriculture generally, but that's another matter. I'm not going to go into that. So that's a bit the why and the how. Well, we've been helping our partners already to manage the forest sustainably for a number of years, for 2 decades, I would say. The new framework in Europe, the European Green Deal, now focuses on this regulation because we need not only to engage with our developing country partners in particular, or for that matter, with big markets like the USA or China or Canada. We need to have a very much fine-tuned approach. These are very different countries. And for this, Article 30 of the regulation foresees a strategic framework that will be fine-tuned for each of those countries. Now, this will imply, and this is very new as well, cooperation between the 27 countries that make up the EU. Some years ago, you would have the EU funding or supporting certain forest management practices, but then some member states of the EU, some countries, would do something on top of that. There was some coordination, but it wasn't really strong enough. We are coming there, and this regulation is part of that effort. It will be applied equally in the 27 member states, and we will be drawing resources from them, from their custom offices, from their competent authorities, to make sure that sustainability is ensured in the global supply chains for these commodities I mentioned. So for this, we are already working on it, on this engagement with partners. Here in DC, of course, I'm very busy with the US Department of Agriculture, with the US trade representative, who are raising concerns. Our guys in Ottawa, in Canada, they're doing the same, and our guys around the world are trying to engage with the countries that they are in. It is important because we are, let's say, setting a standard globally and we will back it up with some investments, with some money to support, particularly developing countries. I want to talk about figures as well to finalize. We're going to double our support to 1 billion euros, more than $1 billion, in 2021, 2024. Most of it will be to ensure accountability, to ensure that compliance with the regulation, including GPS location, etc., all the articles that you have in the regulation. I want to finalize with some key messages. I know I'm going over my time, so sorry about that. Just to say that the regulation is basically bringing together all available tools that we have in the EU: trade, policy, financial investment. It will put a deforestation-free stamp that will be a guarantee of quality sustainability globally. This is what we're hoping. And hopefully this standard will also be applied by other major consumer markets, the US, in my case, priority, Canada or China. We hope all of these markets can walk the talk with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manuel. And just to lift up kind of both, to kind of applaud the EU for how you move from a declaration to action, right? How do you move from commitments to actually making it real on the ground, but also for recognizing that to solve these issues everyone has to be a part of the solution, right? The supply chains, we need to think about how everyone, because if only some people are part of the solution and others aren't, it ain't gonna work. So how we actually make that work is very important. Next, Reverend Leo Woodbury, delighted to have you here. He is the pastor of the Kingdom Living Temple in Florence, South Carolina. He's been working on environmental justice issues since the 1990s, when he became involved in addressing the impacts of mercury pollution on communities. Executive director of the nonprofit New Alpha Community Development Corporation, and previous environmental justice chair of Sierra Club's Ready for 100 campaign, and a lead organizer for the People's Climate March. Reverend, delighted to have you join us. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that kind invitation. And I just feel so honored and privileged to be in the company of such esteemed colleagues. I come from one of the smallest states in the United States, South Carolina, and reside in the PD region, which is the sacred land of the PD tribe. And we work closely with them around forest issues. And we work, with communities throughout the South, but primarily in a community called Britain's Neck, which was actually incorporated back in 1790. And I always say, full disclosure, my family is from that area, and my ancestors actually came from Woodbury Plantation. That's where my last name came from upon emancipation. And this community, like many in the Southeast, are being logged extensively. As many of you know, the Southeast is called the wood basket of the world and is being logged at twice the rate of the Amazon forest. And this is having devastating impacts, not only on the land, biodiversity, the ecosystem, but also on communities. And what we have in the southeastern portion of the United States is the expansion, the rapid expansion of the biomass wood pellet industry, which, as my colleague Bill Mumar and many others know, is neither sustainable nor is it carbon neutral. And there is no market for wood pellets in the United States of America. These pellets are exported primarily to Europe, the United Kingdom, and now we're also seeing emerging markets in Asia. The pellets are coal-fired along with coal in order to produce electricity. But the devastation that is being just wreaked upon the lands in the southeastern portion of the United States is causing extensive flooding in communities that we described as forested environmental justice communities in rural areas. And so we're seeing increased flooding with climate impacts. We're seeing homes that are not only flooded, but have a great deal of mold. And so in the Brittany community, we have children now who are being bused up to 45 minutes one way a day because their school had to be closed down because of mold. And as these pellets are transported from our forested environmental justice communities, they're being transported to either low wealth communities such as that are predominantly white, such as in Lucedale, Mississippi, but mostly to people of color and tribal communities where they are then turned into wood pellets. The trees are turned into wood pellets, and we have extensive air pollution. People have respiratory problems. Homes are literally, you can see homes and cars that are covered with particulate matter. And this is just expanding. And as we get increased extreme heat with the lack of trees and the lack of forest coverage, we're also seeing that people are being impacted by extreme heat, becoming victims of stroke, being sent to the hospital, and in some cases becoming fatalities. And there are also many people who use wells for their potable water. And we know that it is our trees that actually filter and clean our water. So they're being impacted by this. We have farmers who are losing topsoil. And so we have been very blessed working with the PD tribe in Marlborough County to be able to, they have just completed their second building and now have purchased 93 acres of forested land, which they will be keeping in conservation and making sure that it's not logged. We have 7.5 acres in a predominantly African-American community where we have just completed in April constructing the Eastern United States first environmental justice training center. The 7.5 acres are on wetlands so that we can protect those trees in the forest. We have up to 40 community members who are divided into 5 working groups dealing with mitigation of flooding, logging, reducing logging, developing small-scale agricultural businesses so we can create engines of economic development as well as recreation. And we know that outdoor recreation and small-scale agricultural businesses actually generate more revenue than logging does. And then last but not least, out of those 5 groups, we have a policy group as well, and they work with elected officials to see if we can change policy. So with the training center, we are training people to keep the forest standing, to develop ways of producing income so people don't have to sell the trees on their property to pay for property taxes and revenue in a county, Marion County, which is 65% African American and has been ranked since the 1990s as one of the poorest 10 counties out of 46 counties in the state of South Carolina. We've also been blessed to work with groups in partnership with Dogwood Alliance and others in states throughout the southeastern portion of the U.S. In 2018, we had a Justice First tour where we visited 12 southern states and 25 cities, meeting with over 300 organizations. We also work with communities in the Caribbean. We work with agricultural missions in both Liberia and Sierra Leone, paying a special attention to what's happening with the rubber industry there in Liberia and also in Tanzania, and the Climate Action Network International. We work with them closely. One of the nodes is U.S. Climate Action Network, and I'm a board member of that. And so we realize we're actually in New York now. We come every year to New York City, not always during climate week, but we are here for our 7th annual Global South Summit. For 7 years, we've been looking at those intersectional issues and looking at shared issues and shared community-led solutions that we might be able to come up with throughout the Global South. So I'm going to stop there because I'm really excited. I want us to jump into this panel. I want us to have participation from those who are on here and, you know, try to answer their questions and see if we can come up with some solutions to what is the first, the only, and the greatest existential problem that is facing this planet. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Reverend. I'm so energized by kind of all the different stories that we're hearing, and just to kind of compare a little bit what Manuel said with what the Reverend said, both the recognition that those of us living in the developed world have to think about what we consume and how that's produced, but the Reverend talking about even in the developed world, how we produce things and where they're consumed elsewhere and the challenges that faces. So, this is all interlinked. I'm going to ask if everyone could bear with me. I'm going to ask Bill if he'd like to say a few words. I believe that he may have a little bit of for personal reasons, a need not to be able to stay for the entire time today. So I was going to do that. Then I'm going to come back, Seem, to you and Sikade, and then we'll have a little bit. So if you bear with me, Bill, over to you.
Oh, Manish, thank you. I'm sorry. I sort of halted and things moved on. I did have a few more things I wanted to say. I wanted to try and set things in context here about the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use. I actually watched that whole procedure on Zoom, and as you know, it was led by President Biden and Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson. And they made a very solemn declaration, and they presented it out, and it was typical UN. They reaffirmed their respective commitments to all the good treaties, the Climate Treaty and the Paris Agreement and the Biodiversity Treaty and everything else. And then they made another statement which was really important and substantive. I'll just read it. Reaffirm our respective commitments to sustainable land use and to the conservation, protection, sustainable management, and restoration of forests and other terrestrial ecosystems. Well, that's exactly what we need. There's no question about that. But then they said, we therefore commit to working collectively to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030 while delivering sustainable development and promoting an inclusive rural transformation. And they'll do that by conserving forests and other ecosystems and accelerate their restoration. But then they will also facilitate trade and development products in forest products. Okay, so we're going to have it both ways, apparently. And then they proudly announced 145 nations, and they have this down to the fine decimal points, covering 90.94% of the land of the forests of the world, to 2 decimal places, and they have it down to the individual hectare. 3,691,510,640. Okay, so we had this in exquisite detail. On the other hand, it seemed a little hypocritical to me for Prime Minister Johnson to be standing up there while his country is claiming to have, they've actually reduced their coal consumption, but they've replaced it all from wood that comes from Leo Woodbury's backyard. And they count it as 0. I can assure you the atmosphere does not count it as 0. And the damage is experienced by Leo Woodbury, Reverend Leo Woodbury, and the many people he is talking about here today. It just amazes me that he could stand there with a straight face and actually Biden read all these statements. Boris Johnson did not, but I guess I give him credit for having some degree of integrity for that. But it's so given this disconnect, I think it's really important that we hold governments to their word. I mean, I'm actually have worked both I worked with Leo Woodbury and the people in the Southeast. I'm working right now with the European Union. And in my early days at Tufts University, there was a big push by students to divest from bonds in Hydro-Quebec, because Hydro-Quebec was planning to destroy the lands of the Cree Nation and flood them, which they did. And I was asked, I was brand new at the university, and I was asked by the president to head a committee to advise him what to do, and the trustees. And so we raised all the issues, and we said there's a human rights issue, there's an environmental and sustainability issue, and there's a financial issue, because Quebec is only 7 million people, and this is a huge bond issue of billions of dollars. The trustees agreed to divest from them, but on the economic grounds, not on the others. The students were all upset. I said, look, when we got the right action, even if it's for the wrong reason, we got the right action. But it would have been nicer if it had been for the right reasons. And I know the Cree people have suffered because of the building of that huge reservoir on their land. I think one of the ways to approach this with governments hold their feet to the fire on the declaration, but also bring them up to date with what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which I had nothing to do with the last dozen years or so. So this is not something I had anything to do with. But the thing about IPCC is it's kind of a second peer review of everything that's been written in the last previous 6 years, and go back and look at previous information and evaluate it, and then put it all into a single package. Now, unfortunately, it's not really quite a single package. It's 4 volumes, each one of which is 1,000 pages long. And I think this last time they actually got up to 10,000 pages. So nobody's going to read 10,000 pages. But there are some very important things in here that I have plucked from the 10,000 pages. Safeguarding biodiversity and ecosystems is fundamental to climate resilient development in light of the threats climate change poses to them and their roles in adaptation and mitigation. Then they put it in parentheses, very high confidence. When the IPCC says very high confidence, it means everybody agreed this was really about as correct as you could be. That safeguarding biodiversity and ecosystems is fundamental to climate resilient development. They tied it to development. A second statement they made, maintaining the resilience of biodiversity and ecosystem services at a global scale depends on effective and equitable conservation of approximately 30 to 50% of Earth's land, freshwater, and ocean areas, including currently near natural ecosystems. That they have with high confidence, because they're not sure whether it should be 30 or 50%. So it's not that we shouldn't be doing it, it's just, what's the range here to keep the planet functioning. And, it occurs to me that we've always thought of the forests and the oceans as a resource to be exploited, or in the settling of the Western Hemisphere, it was a barrier to be overcome. I mean, the early settlers in the United States wrote back about this horrible country that was so wild and these impenetrable forests and so forth. They had to be removed because it didn't look like England, right? They had to make it look like England. And what we really need to understand is that forests are one of the 2 major processes in the operation of the planet that has made the climate that we have possible. And if we keep destroying it, we are, if you can see, we're having these consequences that are pretty devastating. One other statement from the IPCC working AR6 report, and I will apologize ahead of time. This may seem self-serving, but it says protection of existing natural forest ecosystems is the highest priority for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And they quote a paper that I and his colleagues wrote in 2019, the pro-forestation paper, that allowing forests to grow to achieve their potential for carbon accumulation and biodiversity is the most important thing we can do to meet these goals. So in other words, it's protect what we have first, reduce emissions from all sources, including forests and land. And we cannot plant our way out of the climate emergency we've created. We have to take action. And so I suggest we remind governments of their specific public commitment to the Glasgow Leaders Declaration of Forest and Land Use and amplify the message with the critically important IPCC findings, the recent findings from last year, and how they might move to meet those goals. Because we have this situation in the Southeast US, Canada's managed forests since 2000 have become a source of carbon rather than a sink. So, you know, this isn't just the Amazon, as we're making clear, it's us. To quote a former cartoon character, we have met the enemy and he is us. So let's try to, so us should be the ones to fix it. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole rest of the discussion. I'll stay as long as I can, but I really appreciate this. This is a wonderful thing to be doing, and I hope this will turn into a real effort to change, to have the leaders live up to their declarations. Thank you.
Bill, thank you for bringing that perspective, particularly around the science, into the conversation. Just a 30-second tangent. Last night I was at a dinner, and seated next to me, someone spoke, was the Bangladesh climate minister, and he spoke about what's happening in Bangladesh, and he said he is exceedingly tired of people saying things that are entirely inconsistent with what the IPCC is saying. We have all endorsed the IPCC. We understand the science, and yet we make commitments or fail to make commitments that align with what the science says. And I think we need to start calling that out in a more full-throated way. A little bit more accountability is needed. So thank you for that. I want to turn to Sim Caruso, who is the European Forest Campaigner for FERN, which is a leading environmental NGO based in Brussels. He spent over 2 decades working for a national NGO in Estonia on forest protection. And at FERN is focusing on the governance, the management, the monitoring of European forests. Sim, delighted to have you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm actually replacing my colleague Hanna Mowat, who sends her best greetings to everybody, either in the panel or following this. But unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. And maybe I'll use this opportunity to also reflect a little bit how this declaration and the messages it carries and the aims it sets reflects with EU developments and policies lately, and maybe slightly repeat on what Manuel has said, but also maybe give it a little bit of an NGO touch and view as well. So the decision-making and legislative processes in EU work in a sort of political cycle that starts with all the institutions being set, Parliament, Commission, and so on, and they set the priorities and goals for the time being, and this cycle is about to enter a new phase next year. So it's a very good moment to do already a little bit of stock taking what has happened at the last one. And I guess the Commission we've had has been very eager to project EU to be a climate leader, and not only climate leader, but also recognizing other issues like biodiversity and several other environmental issues that are related with climate. And this is exciting for everybody working in this kind of space. And I think the start of this cycle, we also felt that the actual poor state and negative trends of our own forests in Europe were well recognized, and this was reflected in the biodiversity strategy, forest strategy that were like the next level documents out of the European Green Deal. But what we've been concerned about in a way, that the actual outcome is a little bit of a mixed bag of things. So clearly, we also see EUDR as a positive, or the deforestation regulation as a positive outcome. But just to say that although it's not protectionists and it deals with the northern and southern forest the same way, it's still designed having the southern circumstances in mind and avoids some of the northern issues, I would say. So there is still an element of this not being enough for the northern forest. We are hugely disappointed how the discussion around bioenergy turned out, and there was no actual improvement in the current policy, and EU has been leading this view and these kind of incentives, and it's really a disappointing outcome. There is a renewed LULUCF target and the country targets that is still a mixed thing, I would say. The potential that forests still have to contribute is not fully recognized, and it's there are shortcomings, but we need to recognize that the EU goal on LULUCF has been raised with this document. The nature restoration law is still in the making, but hasn't really been up to the hopes, and there is a lot of political debates that are not as science-based and practical as they used to be, and it's taken over by slogans, which worries us. Commission hasn't released monitoring legislation that they foresee in the forest strategy, so this is still something NGOs wait for. The old growth pledges process is again a mixed thing. The countries are not really picking up in a way that they should, and that would be relevant in the circumstances. The last remaining old growth forests are in Europe. And there is another regulation apart from bioenergy that we are concerned about, which is on packaging, and that promotes the wood use in an unsustainable way, in our view, and this is still being discussed. So our take from what has happened is that EU is quite eager to regulate forests outside of its territory, but is still hesitant to really come up to the task to improve its own forests. And in this space, I would say the global accountability is very, very relevant. We've seen fairly good accountability in accounting for actual emissions, industrial emissions, because it's kilos and tons, and it's comparable, it's understandable. When it comes to more difficult issues like what does restoration really mean? How do we do it? What's degradation? It's a more gray area where like, I would still say the industrial interests get their way through, but therefore I think Northern Forest people have come together and create this kind of framework for accountability, and I hugely welcome this initiative by NRDC. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Seem, and for kind of elevating both the kind of inequities around talking about what other countries need to do versus what we need to do, and also how current structures focus disproportionately on the tropics at the expense of some of the northern forests. So appreciate that. I want to call in Sikade Egbuwalu, who is the desk officer for the Convention on Biological Diversity at the Federal Ministry of Environment in Nigeria. She has been central to Nigeria playing such a key leadership role. Hey, there you are, on biodiversity protection, including its strong support for 30 by 30, a powerful voice for calling for international financial mechanisms, ocean protection, and addressing some of the inherent power disparities in negotiations around biodiversity and climate. With that, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Manish. And it's an honor to be here on the panel to speak with other dignitaries. And I really want to appreciate NRDC for this invitation. I'm sorry I joined a little bit late. I was running in between several meetings this morning. So I'm honored to be invited here to highlight the critical importance of delivering the pledge to halt and reverse deforestation and forest and land degradation as contained in the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on forest and land use. Nigeria is part of a sub-region called ECOWAS, for those that may not know. And this sub-region have endorsed the urgency of the Glasgow Pledge, because as decision makers, we know that our forests in West Africa are fundamental to improving and safeguarding local livelihoods. Our forests represent the main source of wood energy, timber, lumber, and several other uses for the population of about 240 million people. And it provides locals with a varieties of non-timber products that also contribute to improving food security, health, and household incomes. Like I said, our lives and our livelihoods are at stake in the face of the forest degradation and deforestation that we face in our sub-region. The rate of deforestation and forest degradation between the year 2000 and 2015 was more than 13%, and which is about 704,000 hectares per year. In my country, we have lost more than 1 million hectares of tree cover over the last 20 years. This shows that there is an urgent and immediate crisis for us and for our populations. And so it shows our commitment, why we are committed to the implementation of the Glasgow Declaration as an essential safeguard for the future of our people. The fight against forest loss and degradation is a fight that should be tackled by all the countries and not just countries of the Global South. We're all affected by the harmful effect of climate change and biodiversity loss, and losing or degrading tree cover anywhere in the world has dire consequences for everyone on the planet. I'm proud to share with you today that the African nations who pledged to the Glasgow Leaders Declaration have reached a consensus to support the development of a Glasgow Declaration accountability framework as a means of driving global progress and promoting greater equity between forest protection standards. The vision of Nigeria and the rest of Africa is clear through the development of this accountability framework, and is to ensure that the world truly unites and respond as one. We believe the solutions for delivering on the Glasgow Pledge must be inclusive of both tropical and non-tropical forests. Boreal and temperate forests, the global north, are among the most carbon dense, ecologically vital ecosystems in the world. The boreal forest alone store most of the planet's global forest carbon, holding almost twice as much carbon per acre as the tropical forest, which shows the importance of this ecosystem. Yet, the primary and old growth forests continue to be clear-cut at alarming rates in some countries of the global north. Industrial logging is the single largest driver of gross tree cover loss in the world, and forests in the global north are experiencing some of the fastest degradation in the world. Our policies downplay or ignore the long impact and effort to cast doubt on accepted terms like degradation in the global north when it comes to their forests, enabling industrial logging to continue unabated without meaningful reporting, monitoring, or scrutiny. Not only does it lack accountability, not only does the lack of accountability undermine progress on natural climate solutions in northern country, it also places an inequitable burden on the global south. Our countries are not only held to a different standard, but we also risk being disadvantaged in the global marketplace. I've heard situations where some of the wood business owners in the country are having difficulty in selling their products at the global marketplace, all while feeling the impact most acutely. In the global south, we are being asked to do more with less, while the wealthy countries of the global north continue to do less with more resources, which we think that there needs to be a change in this narrative, because we believe the global north has more resources and should do much more than what the global south that has less resources are doing. We must commit to a shared global responsibility for forest protection, both to increase commitment from tropical countries, but even more so to dismantle the long-standing inequitable loopholes that have privileged and protected industrial logging in the global north. The accountability framework allows us to not to see forests as resources to exploit, but as vitally integrated part of a global ecosystem, where North and South are both held accountable, where public scrutiny of forest management is something that concerns northern forests as much as scrutiny of industry does in the global South tropical forests. For that reason, our continent as a whole seeks to secure the development of enhanced and common reporting, monitoring, and metrics to ensure commitments that are enshrined in the Glasgow Leaders Declaration are implemented to the same standard within and outside of tropics to allow for shared progress towards the declaration's critical goals. We encourage you to join us in this endeavor by supporting the development of the Glasgow Declaration Accountability Framework. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Just the opportunity we have in developing an accountability framework to deal with both the implementation and the equity challenges that are still intrinsic in the declaration. So just to thank you for spotlighting ways in which we can do that. I just want to say one small thing. We had a more gender balanced set of panelists, but because of some last minute shifts, it's less so, but just wanted to acknowledge that. Look, we only have about 20 minutes left. I'm going to ask each of you a question. If you can kind of limit your response to a minute, that would allow us to take some questions from the audience. I just want to encourage the audience also to please place some questions in the Q&A. But Norman, that might allow you to go just a little bit longer, since I know you had a little bit of a shorter introduction. But I want to say that the Cree Nation has been a leader in designing truly community-led and designed land protection, melding kind of indigenous, more traditional knowledge with Western science. This is going to be so essential if we're going to get this accountability framework right. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how we elevate and uplift the critical role of indigenous knowledge in the conversations we're having today.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. For the Cree Nation, we definitely had a huge impact on resource development. It really impacted social well-being of the Ino, and as well as on our lands. We've come a long way, and the JBNQA was the first model land claims agreement in Canada. Before that, you had historical treaties, numbered treaties. At the time, lands and natural resources were under federal jurisdiction, and it wasn't under provincial jurisdiction. So so in the historic numbered treaties, you had the federal government kind of locked up Aboriginal peoples, Indigenous peoples in reserved lands. And that allowed, after when the transfer of lands and natural resources went to the provinces, it allowed provinces to go in and carry out resource development activities within Indigenous lands without any Indigenous consultations with Indigenous peoples. And it had a big impact on them, and it's still an issue today. Contemporary Canada right now, when you look at JBNQA, it's the same process that the federal government and provincial governments wanted to take on us, to lock us up in a reserve land so Quebec would have access to our lands and natural resources to develop them. And the Cree, on their side, they wanted to lock in a decree in the reserve, so it wouldn't allow the Cree to be able to play a greater role in the development and management of lands and natural resources within the USG. So JBNQA, the negotiators, the Cree side, looked at Category 1 lands, Category 2 lands, and then Category 3 lands, which encompassed the whole territory, EUC, which we have occupied from time immemorial. So so now we're coming out, because of our agreements, because of JBNQA, because of Pays de Brave. Pays de Brave was an agreement that was a nation-to-nation agreement with Quebec that we entered into to resolve a lot of forestry matters, because we were excluded from Quebec at the time was carrying out these policies of exclusion, whereby the Cree didn't have a say in what took place within the territory. So the concerns we have with the environment, wildlife, our Cree way of life, Quebec never consulted with the Cree, never took those into account when they were developing forest management plans. So it had an impact on us. So when we entered into the highest level of negotiations and reached a nation-to-nation agreement on Pays de Brave, then the Cree were able to have a say on how development would be carried out within the Cree territory. So it allows us. And beyond that, Quebec announced Plan Nord. And which another thing, they had their own vision on how they wanted to develop the North. The Cree came out with their own version of Plan Nord, and we had our own vision. And Quebec's Plan Nord was incompatible with the Cree way of life. So on our side, we ensured that we were not excluded, that we had a major role in the development and management of our territory. So from there, we were able to look at to ensure that any resource development activities that took place within the Cree territory was compatible with the Cree way of life and the Cree philosophy of conservation. So those things came into play. We are able to exercise and assert a little more governance over the territory, and also the right of self-determination. we do believe that we have a right to be able to determine the destiny of our nation as well as the destiny of our lands, and be involved in a nation building in a way where we could freely express ourselves. We had in those plans in Plan Mode, we came up with the protected areas and within EUC. We worked with the land users, which we call tallymen, that looked after hunting trap lines within the family trap lines. We worked with them. We worked with other Cree land users to identify areas that were very sensitive for them, that they wanted to protect. So we worked on that with quite a lot. It was the Cree Nation government that consulted with the communities to identify areas that were significantly important to the communities. So we were able to do that. On top of that, the Payda Brow kind of allowed the southern communities to look at parks. And Mistissini, the community of Mistissini, came up with a park. Ojibwe came up with a park, and we were hoping to link it in. We are still in the process of linking it to the to Waswanipi's biodiversity reserve. So we wanted to tap into tourism and have visitors come in into the Cree territory, so that they can see Cree culture, the Cree way of life, the importance of our way of life. So there are a lot of things happening in EUC. One of the things that I see that would make a difference also is on my platform when I got in as Deputy Grand Chief. A lot of people supported the idea of coming up with a Cree Nation Research Institute, and we're looking at right now. We're building it, and the way I see the Research Institute we're looking at the impacts of resource development within the territory. Data collection, all that will have an influence on how resource development activities will be carried out within the territory. So I think for us, we're moving forward on a lot of things. I just want to touch on something very quickly.
Very quick, just because I got it. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, last week I was here in Chesapeake. I'm in Chesapeake. I'm talking to you guys from Chesapeake. We had a visit from the president of Hydro-Quebec. Quebec had appointed a new president. So he came in to visit, and he says to the public, I flew in and I saw the size of LG2. It's huge. When I looked at the islands, he said, and then there was an elder that spoke up. Those are not islands. Those are mountains. Anyway, I'll finish with that. Thank you very much.
Powerful. Thank you. Look, I'm just going to pepper each of you with questions. Welcome kind of a really brief response, because we also have some questions from the audience that I'd like to be able to get to. Manuel, a lot of the work, a lot of the focus before has been on industry and markets, looking at certification, looking at offsets as the sole drivers of change. When we look at accountability for northern forests, why is it so critical for governments to step in?
You mean for northern forests?
Yeah.
Well, because we need to treat everybody equally, and this is what we're doing in our regulation. You cannot go to the global south and say you have to do this and that, whereas we are not walking the talk ourselves. It is clear that the EU as a big market is responsible for the imports of commodities that are causing deforestation. So we're putting an end to that. But these commodities are also produced in developed countries. And the proof that we've hit the right nerve is that I'm having a lot of work lately, as I said, with the USDA and the US trade representative. I hear what Sim is saying, and we would try to do that as much as we can. But I can tell you, we must have done something right when we have developed countries like Canada and the US really running after us and being extremely difficult. Thanks.
I like that. That is absolutely true. Okay. Reverend, as we think about this Glasgow Declaration accountability framework, accountability has to work at different levels. what we do at the global level matters, but what we do at the local level matters even more because that's where it counts. What can you tell us about how we make sure that the accountability happens on the ground? Huge question, but what's the one or two things you would encourage us to think about?
Sure, I'd say first of all, on the local level, we really have to work on educating our local governing bodies because they are the ones that actually permit the logging to take place. So local commissioners, local county councils are the ones that have to be the protectors of the people who elect them to office. Then I also wanted to kind of touch on the previous question that nationally we also have to work on what policies and budgeting takes place in the global north, because it's only the subsidies from the United Kingdom and the US that allows companies like Enviva and Drax to not only clear cut our forests, but also to manufacture them into wood pellets that are burned along with coal and are not carbon neutral.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend. Seem halting, reversing deforestation, degradation is going to take more than any single policy solution. It's going to require a whole constellation of changes from subsidies to rights protections. What are the most problematic areas that we've seen? What are some of the solutions that you feel an accountability framework needs to help address? Where are the big challenges?
I would say you rightly point at the subsidies and the need to scrap the incentives that work against these goals. That would be the major change if we are able to do that. But I would also point at some of the very specifics, one being defining degradation. We can get over these discussions if there is enough goodwill, I would say, but it is a problematic because it allows also bad will to operate in this space. Monitoring is critical for accountability. We have to agree on monitoring principles and also agree on what the substance of restoration is that is foreseen already in international agreements, but still takes time to put metrics on it and define it properly. So these would be some of the issues that we need to resolve.
So let me thank you, Steve. Let me turn. I want to pick up just on three questions before we close. One is a technical question that Toby wrote in the chat around the definition of deforestation used. If someone can just talk a little bit more, I know we lost Bill, but if one of you could talk a little bit more about the definition used in the Glasgow Declaration around deforestation, degradation. That's kind of one question. There's a second question around how do you ensure accountability within your respective positions? All of you, I think, are absolutely trying to do the right thing, different places, but how do you think about accountability? How do you ensure inclusivity about your work? And then Jennifer, if I might call on you if that's okay. There's a question around the Glasgow Declaration accountability framework and just what's the process kind of to take that forward? So I'm wondering if we could pick up on some of those questions before we close. Does anyone have a good response to the technical question from Toby?
I'm happy to jump in on that one really quickly. Thank you, Toby, for that question. Yes, the Glasgow Leaders Declaration includes both deforestation and land degradation. And so that land degradation component does encompass impacts from industrial logging and the loss of things like primary, old growth, and mature forests. So really good question, because historically the focus has been exclusively on deforestation, which is a term that applies only to the conversion of forest to other land uses, and as a result, mostly applies only to the tropics. So the Glasgow Declaration was such a giant step forward, as Manish mentioned, because of its inclusion of degradation. And that really allows this to be a framework that can apply to all forests and facilitate global action. But of course, accountability is needed.
Let me now turn maybe to the panelists. If anyone would like to speak about this question around accountability and inclusivity from where you sit, that question. And then Jennifer, I might come to you at the end to talk a little bit about next steps with the accountability framework.
I'll jump on that one.
Please.
The first thing is that we need to ensure that communities that are impacted are involved with decision making, with planning, decision making, implementation, allocation of resources, and evaluation of what actually happens. One of the things that we've been working on is surveying people who live in forested environmental justice communities and turning that into open source apps that community members can have on their phones or their laptops. So when they're talking to policymakers, they can let them know the impacts that their constituencies are actually receiving and what needs to be done. But we also have to work hard in communities in the global north to make sure that the platforms that people run for office on includes pro-forestation and an end to deforestation, which I believe happens in the global north when you cut down trees and put in parking lots and concrete. And so those are ways that we can hold elected officials accountable. But in order to do that, we have to educate communities and give them the tools to demand that their campaign platforms include defending our forests and keeping them standing.
Thank you, Reverend. Manuel?
If I may jump just quickly, thank you, Manish. Just jumping on what Reverend was saying, and coming back to the regulation. So we're going to build, as part of the regulation, an IT system where all the due diligence declarations from companies will be fed. So this is going to create a massive amount of data that can be very useful. But importantly, in terms of accountability, all this information in a aggregate way, so as not to clash with privacy concerns, is going to be available to the public. So a lot of it is going to be available. And that is crucial in accountability, because that, combined with the EU membership of the Aarhus Convention on Access to Justice, combined with the environmental crime regulation that we are also working on, that's another regulation, that's going to provide much more leverage for the civil society to point the finger at things that are going wrong with the regulation. So that's a crucial element, just to point out. Thanks.
Incredibly important. It's kind of, the Reverend kind of global and local, and Manuel kind of the ability to share data allows external outside actors to hold people to account. And that's going to be a big shift when that data is made available. So really important point. Any other final interventions before I ask Jennifer to speak about the accountability framework?
I'll throw in a comment, very short. No, before I paid a brow, we were totally excluded from planning and decision making what happens within the Cree territory. After paid and brow, we felt that we were included in that thing, into the forestry planning and decision making, how we were going to carry out forestry activities within the territory. I believe the Cree have a say. We have the Cree Quebec Forestry Board that both parties sit down together to look at forestry. But the agreement has been very challenging to implement. Very tough. But we're slowly getting there. But we did address a lot of our core concerns. But I believe networking with other international bodies that are designed to protect and promote the rights of Indigenous peoples is a way to to work with. pulling down international instruments to move forward on to address a lot of our concerns. That's basically what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Steve,
I-
I'm going to give you the very last, well, the last word here before I turn to Jennifer.
Yeah, just to quickly to say, like any accountability mechanism, especially when it's global and operates in different spaces, the civil society scrutiny and also, yeah, the local people's will to actually care for the forest is critical, and therefore I would think the parties outside of governments can best help if they unite, if they talk to each other, if they learn from each other, if they get inspired from each other, and they do play critical role. It's not the question of if they can help, but their help is much needed.
Jennifer, one of the themes that's been central in this conversation, and quite frankly central in a lot of the conversations at Climate Week, is how we move towards action, how we integrate equity, and ultimately the need for a greater accountability. Can you just say a few more words about the Glasgow Declaration Accountability Framework and what are some of the next steps?
Sure, thanks, Manish. So the Glasgow Declaration Accountability Framework is something that we began bringing to governments just a couple of months ago to really call on them to live up to the ambitious goals that are articulated in the Glasgow Declaration. The Glasgow Declaration has a 2030 deadline for achieving those goals, and that's a deadline that the IPCC has also reiterated. So we need urgent action, and we need concrete implementation. And so the accountability framework has a whole range of tools around monitoring, reporting, concrete interim policy commitments, and the articulation of common understandings around the need for global action on this. And in terms of next steps, as Sakade mentioned, the accountability framework has received support and endorsement from African nations, and we're calling on countries and governments in the lead up to COP28, where one of the big themes is going to be accountability as part of this global stocktake process, calling on countries to indicate support for the accountability framework and to start to advance the measures that are needed to achieve the success of the Glasgow Declaration.
So we are at a time. I wanted first express my gratitude, my thanks to all the speakers for joining us today and to all the participants. Incredibly timely, important conversation, how we translate all that we have been fighting for so that it really creates change on the ground. I want to close with a proverb, a Chinese proverb that many of you may have heard, but I think is relevant for this conversation in this week and this year. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. It's time. It is now time for us to get serious about accountability. Thank you, everyone. Very much appreciate your support, and we will be in touch on this journey forward. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish, and
Thank you so much.
NRDC.
Thank you, everybody.